you even want to do. Now, I think that's a fair thing to do when you're 18 or 19 years old, is spending some time sitting there and actually figuring out what you want to do. Hey, what's up, everybody? It's your boy Juju, and welcome back to the 1% of Juju podcast, where we teach you the practical steps to live your life like the 1%. As always, make sure that you are subscribed to the podcast so you don't miss a single episode, because we are on our way to becoming the biggest personal finance podcast on the planet. We believe it, I'm telling you. But so be on the journey with us, be there with us, and we're going to continue bringing you guys great content and obviously making you guys millionaires, and we all going to become millionaires together. We want as many people as part of this crew as possible. But for today's topics, and also before I jump into the topic, we want you to then share this information with other people that will become millionaires as well. So it's not about just me and whatever, it's about you inspiring the next generation, learning things, and getting better overall. But let's jump into today's topic, because we're going to speak about why I hate higher education. Because obviously it's grad season, so I'm here to ruin it all and tear it all down. No, but in all seriousness, I don't actually hate higher education. So if you're a recent grad, if you just graduated, congratulations to you. It's absolutely amazing. I know that some of you guys will be going through graduations in the next few weeks, at least outside of university, even high school, things of that nature. I don't know how many people listen to me that actually are coming out of high school, but for college and university grads, congratulations. Before you take the next step and start thinking about what you're going to do next, where you're going to be studying next, if you're going to do a master's, or what life is going to look like, take a moment and really be proud of yourself and proud of what you've just accomplished. You just spent like 15, 16 years in school. 16 years straight in school. So really be proud of yourself and take some time to give yourself a little pat on the back before you start stressing about the next step in your life. But like I said, the reason I titled Why I Hate Higher Education, it's not actually because I hate it, but there are certain flaws, let's say, or I have some strong opinions about certain aspects of higher education or the education system, or how it's perceived at the moment. So I just wanted to talk about it. Obviously, I run a personal finance podcast, so that gives me a platform to come on here and vent and share my opinion, because I can. And you guys can't do anything about it, which is great, except not listen. But you guys do come back every week, so I'm going to continue venting. And I love you guys. So, I had this is what we're going to talk about. And I think I should preface this by saying, like I said, I don't actually hate higher education, and I'm not actually against learning and education and things of that nature. I'm just against the concept or the institution which has become, or the business that higher education has become over time. But learning and growing yourself, it's a huge part of becoming part of the 1%. You have to always acquire more and more information, and become knowledge is power. So that is definitely not what I'm saying, but just you guys will get what I'm trying to say. So at the end of 2021, if I were to dive into this, the total student loan debt, total student debt load reached $1.75 trillion, which is an insane amount of money, with an average of $40,000 per student. Okay, so those are just a couple numbers, a couple statistics. I'll try to focus on that. Obviously, this will be somewhat opinionated, but I'll throw in, try to keep it factual, as well as I try to support every single thing that I have in mind. Now, when you hear things like that, right, you want to be careful before you jump to conclusions like $40,000 per student. Well, obviously, there's a few doctors in there that, took on $150,000 of debt, but now they're making $300,000, $500,000 of debt, which pays for itself. So that skews that number a little bit, right? So you want to be careful with how you take a look at that number and how you consider that number. But the reason I bring that up is because this isn't necessarily about student loans. It's about the higher education of a concept, and I think that we're going to speak about loans a little bit more in the future. But higher education specifically, if you look at the numbers there, in order to understand it over time, right? In 1980, average tuition was $18,056 annually at a public university. I found out the statistics, and then in 2020, the average college tuition is $9,403. I saw some other numbers earlier this week, I believe. That said, and let me look those up because I took a screenshot. I believe I saw them on social media. Just wanted to speak about that because it is important. So, in since 1980, once again, CPI, so that's updated for 2022, I believe. So CPI, so Consumer Price Index, so inflation, just like the value of the dollar is up 228%, but college tuition is up 1,184%. So that came from a podcast called Valuetainment, the Patrick Bet-David podcast. Really like Patrick Bet-David. He has some really interesting things to say about economics specifically. He touches on politics as well, but when it comes to economic stuff, like I really like listening to what he has to say. But so if you think about inflation going up 228%, but college education going up 1,184%, you can ask yourself why, right? And I looked at other numbers, and I'm looking at the 70s, or when you look at salaries, right? In 1980, the average salary was a little over 21,000, and in 2022, the average salary is a little over $51,000. So, like I said, although the prices of college and price of university has gone up an insane amount, these salaries and things of that nature hasn't really followed suit. So I started asking myself the question, and it's been a topic that if you've listened to my podcast in the past, you probably know that I'm somewhat passionate about. But I really started digging into it. So where is all that money going? So I started actually looking into, the breakdown of like your college tuition. Where does most of that money go? What does it actually pay for? And here's the breakdown. Now, I won't tell you the exact numbers because I think that those can vary from university to university. But your tuition pays for salaries, for general instruction expenses, auxiliary student enterprises, academic support, institutional support, student services, grants and financial aid, hospital and healthcare, research, other including taxes and liabilities, public services, independent operations. And that is it. So now, none of these are really bad, right? Like if you think about all of that together, you're like, okay, well, these are pretty necessary, and it helps probably, you look at things like grants and financial aid to probably help for the well-being that more people are able to attend, especially, based on like good grades, based on, financial needs, things of that nature. So it helps there. The concern for me comes when the bulk of what your education money isn't actually going to education. So if you really, there's some of them that may sound, you might be like, okay, well, what actually is that, right? Auxiliary student expenses, academic support, institutional support, whatever, that means. But a lot of that isn't actually going towards your education, even though like they're somewhat important. Having raised the price so much and it actually not going towards your education, it's a little bit of a concern. So education obviously got 1,000% more expensive over time with all these somewhat services being added, but it didn't necessarily get 1,000% better over time. So let's say over the years, right, you paid more, and that would have made sense if over the years you paid more, but now university had a partnership with certain companies, so you can establish certain relationships, learn how to network, figure out what you actually want to do, go on site. And then when you come out, you actually guaranteed to get a job. You know exactly where you're going to be, what your career is going to look like, and you're going to be able to justify that expense. Then it would make sense for that amount to go up that much over time. Or whatever it is. But if you came out with at least some kind of certainty that you're going to get a job that allows you to pay that student loan or pay back those expenses, that justifies those expenses, then it would make great sense. But like we said, one thing that we've seen is salaries haven't gone up by 1,000% over time, right? So like it's not like the quality of life and the value of that degree has significantly increased over time, which is a little bit of the issue. And if you really think about it, you start thinking about your university experience for the people here that have been to university. And I think about my experience, and yes, this might be a little anecdotal, but it's still somewhat factual because that's what a lot of people go through. Your first 2 years, you really don't even spend that much time actually focusing on something that's going to be helpful to your career. You kind of do basic, prerequisites, or however they call those. I haven't been in school in so long and haven't focused on it, but you focus on those things, and most of the time is actually spent like figuring out what you even want to do. Now, I think that's a fair thing to do when you're 18 or 19 years old, is spending some time sitting there and actually figuring out what you want to do. But because let's be honest, at 18 or 19 years old, like I probably had no idea, or did I know what I wanted? I probably knew what I wanted to do in life, but I think that has changed at that point for me. Although I knew I wanted to be in finance, but my actual career is so much different from what I actually thought that I was going to do when I was 18 or 19. So it is very fair that you spend some time actually figuring that out, and that you get some kind of guidance. But figuring out, what you want your career to look like, exploring different things. But my issue is, if you remember the beginning of this podcast, I spoke about the annual tuition is now almost $10,000. So you'll tell me that it's going to cost you $20,000 just to find yourself, right? And I'll try not to get too passionate about this topic, because I am somewhat passionate about this topic, but finding yourself and finding out what you're passionate about shouldn't cost you $20,000, especially when a lot of people come out of university. And that's why I started this episode with saying, give yourself some grace before you try to think that, oh, I need to have this figured out or this, because you're gonna start working and start realizing that maybe the career that you wanted to do is completely different, and you're going to pivot, and that's okay, right? So give yourself some grace and things of that nature. So university, that $20,000 that you spend sometime isn't even accurate, right? Like you're learning the theory of something, and in theory something sounds right, but in practice it's completely different. So I don't really think that you should be paying $20,000 in order to just find yourself, right? Like if you think about like just going on a trip, like purchasing a couple books and finding out, a couple different things to learn more about yourself, and maybe visiting a different country and seeing some places that you haven't seen before. Well, that leads you to find yourself, and that doesn't cost you $20,000. It might cost you a fraction of that. It might cost you $2,000, and you'll be in a pretty good spot. You see a lot of country, you read a lot of books, and you get to learn a whole lot. So, but that's just, like I said, that's just a little bit of, in theory, in an ideal world, things of that nature. But yeah, so let's keep it moving. But overall, you get the point. And when I think about that $20,000 just to find yourself, I just think about it from a bad ROI standpoint. So ROI, return on investment, right? We've spoken about this. And everything in life has a certain return on investment. Now, I know I'm a little bit of an analytical finance geek to some extent, right? So I'm thinking about it from like a money return on investment, but it's not necessarily financially. Everything in life has either a financial, emotional, physical return on investment, right? So I pay a personal trainer to train with me. I'm not going to get that money back in any way. It's not like I'm hoping to compete professionally and make that money back, but it has a return on investment physically because I'm in a better shape, I'm healthier, able to have more energy throughout my day, things of that nature. So those things, like that's my return on investment. Let's say you go out and you purchase something, right? Like you might not sell it later on, or let's say you go to a restaurant, it's not because you're going to get a return on investment, but that experience at a restaurant makes you feel good, so it has an emotional return on investment. Now it's the same thing when it comes to education. It's just a bad return on investment if you're putting $20,000 in order to find yourself and you don't actually figure out how to find yourself, like that just doesn't hold its value. I hope that making sense. So once again, I talk about ideal world and things like that. You should be able to come out of school, right? Like, and just go to work. Meet some people, see something different, see some different parts of the world. Like, a lot of times you come out of school and you've only seen so much of what the world has to offer, and now you expect to make a decision, and you commit yourself to something that's going to cripple you financially for such a long time, in order to, figure things out. But take some time and figure some of these things out. And even if you're coming out of university, do the same thing, right? Figure it out, figure what you like, figure out you don't like, who you are, and move on from there. So I want to talk about how these colleges and university are able to charge this much, because that's a little bit of the basis of this episode, right? Why I hate is such a strong word. I hate using it, but and I did again. But why is it that colleges and universities are able to charge so much? And because at the end of the day, it comes down to supply and demand, right? We spoke about that again. The more the demand there is, and the less supply, the more you're able to charge for something, right? Like the housing market, what we're seeing right now, a lot of people want to buy houses, not a lot of people trying to sell their house. It creates high supply, high demand, low supply. So that's what's going on with universities right now. So if there was no demand for university, and we all decided, well, I'm not going to university because it's not worth it, right? Like, it's not worth $20,000 to find myself, and then another $20,000 to learn the theory of something that, now I have to go and apply in practice, then they would have to lower the amount, right? Like, they have to lower this charge. And if a bunch of people were like, well, I just can't afford to do it, well, then they'd have to lower the amount once again, so to attract people to university. Like, there's a lot of countries where university is actually free because there's certain skills that require university degrees, and they're very in demand. So there's a lot, there's more people that are in need, and therefore universities are cheaper or free or whatever it might be. But so that's what a little bit what's going on is right now. There's such high demand because we've told all these 18, 19-year-olds that have no idea what they want to do with their life that when in doubt, just go to university, and like, that's what you have to do in order to be successful, in order to find a good job, in order to to go anywhere in life, which is simply not true, right? Like, I've seen something on the internet that said that having a university degree can increase your career potential by up to your lifelong earning potential by up to $500,000. And I'm like, well, that's great statistic, and that sounds great in theory, but that's just not true for everyone, right? It depends on what career you're going after, and what, and all of these different things. So there's a lot that actually goes into that. But the fact that just going to universities will increase your earning potential just simply isn't true. Now, the greatest way to demonstrate that is if you look at the example of a doctor versus a plumber. There's actually a video on YouTube. I might link it, I might not, but that shows, from the age of like when they would actually break even, with not thinking about family situation and things like that. If you take two people that start with $0 coming out of high school, one of them decides to go into university, spend that money, and become a doctor, versus the other person goes into becoming a plumber and takes on that trade, they would only break even from like an earnings standpoint, from like a net worth standpoint, so money spent versus money earned, at the age of 42 years old. Right, and this is one of the highest paid profession, a doctor, that there is in the world. So I'm not telling everyone to become a plumber. Now, it is still true that getting a college education can increase your earning potential, right? So don't get me wrong, and not everything is about the money, but this is a little bit to illustrate to you that, like, just telling you, okay, just go to university, you'll make more money, is not always true. It's not as simple as that. So that's that. And once again, the fact that like you have to be successful in or you have to have a college degree, sorry, in order to be successful in your career, that's also not just simply not true, because there's a lot of ways to, whether it's make money or be successful or be able to support a family without having that college education. Um, so let's go back to the supply and demand for just one moment, right? If you think about the job of an attorney, right? Well, that's something that you need to go to university for, right? But let's say there's 5 job openings as an attorney, and let's say there's 2 people with law degrees in this world, just for simple measure. Well, this creates a shortage of attorneys, right? Like that becomes for you. You might be like, hey, let me specialize in that. Let me do the necessary to become an attorney. Right, but if you only have 5 openings as an attorney, but now there's 10 people that have attorney degrees, well, now you have 5 attorneys that don't have jobs, right? But they also just spent $150,000 and they're now in debt, so they can't pay that debt back. So obviously, thinking about the need for the skill that you're going to take on is also extremely important. That's why you don't want to just jump into saying, oh, well, let me just go on and take on that debt, if you don't know that on the back end of this, there's going to be a need for, the skill that you're specializing in, right? And there's kind of like a lot of, there's a lot of industries that have that need and that issue, sorry, at the moment. I'm hoping that makes sense. So let me start wrapping this up. So there's really 3 reasons to go into a field or a career when you think about it. Like, honestly, you're gonna think that it's crazy to think about it. You're like, well, maybe for yourself and things like that, but really think about it. Number 1, career fulfillment and satisfaction, right? Actually doing something that you love, feeling that you have an impact, whatever it is, right? Like the career fulfillment feeling that like, I love my job. I go to work every day and I actually love what I'm doing. Right? Like I was speaking to some people or doing some training at work recently, and they were talking about the fact that like, well, if you won $5 million today, would you just quit your job? Or like if you won enough, right, to take you through retirement, would you just quit your job today? And there's a lot of people that answered no. Like, I probably would, but no, just kidding. But like, there's a lot of people that wouldn't. There's a lot of people that would, but genuinely loving what you do. Number 2 is money. There's nothing wrong with that, right? Like things cost money in this world. And saying that you want money, usually it's not the money that you want, but it's what money can buy you, whether it's security for your family. Maybe it is material items, right? Maybe that is you. You always see people and you're like, hey, I would really like to be wearing designer, driving a fancy car, having a really nice house, things of that nature. That might be a reason you go into a career or a field. Or the reason number 3 is filling a need, right? Seeing an opportunity and wanting to work in that industry. Like you see something that is a need in this world and you're like, hey, there's a gap here. Like, hey, there's not enough electricians. There's not enough plumbers. There's not enough people in tech. Whatever it is, and you're like, well, that's where the opportunity lies. I'm going to specialize in that and go for that. So you have to figure out which one is more important to you and make the decisions and sacrifices accordingly, right? You can't just blindly jump into, well, I'm going to go to university. And it's like, okay, what are you going to specialize in and why? And you're like, well, I don't know, but we'll figure that out later, because that's a $40,000, $50,000, $100,000 decision that, can be hard to come back from later on. So let me dream for a second and show you how, in my ideal world, how this thing would work. Right? So you get out of high school. So if you know exactly what you want to do with your life, great. You're part of like the 1% of the population. Just go ahead and do it, right? Like go ahead, take the steps necessary. If it requires you to go to university in order to be able to do that, go do it. If it doesn't, then don't, right? Like it's pretty self-explanatory. So if you don't know, congrats, you're like myself or any other normal person in this world, right? And not like that 1% of weirdos that just come out of high school and know exactly what they want to do with their life. No, kidding, they're not weirdos. I actually admire them quite a bit. but then you take some time to figure it out. Well, how, right? You might ask, well, you go see some things in this world, right? You travel, you talk to people in the world, you go work, you go do some work, you see what you actually enjoy about work, what you dislike, how does it feel to earn a paycheck? Okay, would you like to earn a bigger one? Whatever it might be, you might invite some people to coffee. Be curious. But I would definitely say, as a piece of advice, don't just borrow $20,000 to try to figure it out, right? But again, that's in my ideal world. Then identify if there's actually demand or money to be made in what you love. Then decide if it's worth it to actually go out and spend a bunch of money to learn that skill, right? So if I'm gonna borrow $40,000 in order to learn how to become to work in marketing, is it going to make sense afterwards? How much can I make? Things of that nature. Does that make sense? I hope so. You can't answer, right? I hope you're nodding your head right now. But anyway, that's my 2 cents. That's my ideal world. Hope that works. But let's wrap this up because we've been here and rambling for a little while now. But I hope this was helpful to some extent. So if you did find some value, please go ahead and share it with someone that you care about or someone you don't care about. As always, that is the only way that this platform grows, and really appreciate your support and help. Make sure that you're subscribed, that you like. Please, if you enjoyed this, leave a 5-star review or a rating on your favorite podcasting platform. Those help me tremendously. And comment on anything. Obviously, send me questions if you have questions and things of that nature. Like I said, this is by no means the gospel, but maybe you're thinking about going into higher education again, or you're thinking about what the next step of your life is, or maybe you have a brother, sister, someone in your close circle that is thinking about this, and my hope is to help you, guide you in making that decision a little bit more logical and stepping away from the feeling side of things, right? So that's it for me. But as always, you already know, make sure that you're taking the steps today to ensure that you're 1% closer to your goals than you were yesterday. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a great day.